We got to talk about family reforms. We got to talk about pro-family reforms at the Wisconsin Capitol that have nothing to do with who gets to marry who and nothing to do with the Wisconsin Supreme Court and abortion. And these actually have a shot at becoming law. Here to join us about it, Chris Reeder. He's with the Institute for Reforming Government. Chris, thanks so much for taking some time. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, good morning, Ben. Great to be on again.
We need to set the table here because we're talking about two reforms in particular, but we're talking about kids in foster care. And that's something that we don't talk about very often. Give me where we came up with this. How did this become one of the things that we're talking about? And this is a small population that I don't think we all have a really good handle on how it works. And therefore, I don't think most of us realize that there are big changes that are needed when we're talking about bringing families back together.
Yeah, so every given day in Wisconsin, there are somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 kids that are in the foster care system. They can be there for a whole number of reasons, but for one reason or another, they're no longer with their biological families. They're in the system. They are perhaps waiting to be adopted. They are maybe with the foster care family while their mom and dad are getting some things fixed in their lives, right? And getting so that they can be reunited with their kids. So you're right. It's a small population relative to the whole population of the state. But it's one of those issues that as we take a look at it, and we're obviously a center right conservative organization, like there just has to be ways that we can offer solutions and ways to help these kids that is not growing government, is not, building up a bureaucracy. And too often, things like this, where we're talking about smaller groups of people and groups that need assistance, too often the solutions are simply turned over to those who want to use government as the solution and grow government and build a bigger government bureaucracy. And maybe the outcomes they have in mind are laudable, but we took a look at it as there has to be a way to do this from with more of a pro-freedom, pro-kid, free market perspective. And that's where we sat out last year and really talked to our peers around the country, took a look at what they're seeing in different states in terms of the child welfare and foster care systems, how are different states approaching it. We talked to other nonprofits in the space, groups that deal with abused kids. And frankly, we even talked to the governor's team. We talked to Governor Evers' Department of Children and Families to figure out what is it that the state government right now is doing. Maybe there's things that they're doing well. What are they doing wrong? And frankly, just where is the law and regulations in need of change because it's maybe getting in the way of them doing things right. And this is that, we come up with some of these solutions that, again, it's a way to help kids. It should be bipartisan. It's not the big sexy fight of eliminating the income tax or expanding school choice or doing something like that. But it's certainly worth the fight.
We do talk a lot about families. As conservatives, families are the building blocks of good communities. Good communities make for good cities make for good states, nation, 50 laboratories of democracy, all on down that line. We've talked about it before. But when we talk about pro-family stuff, we do tend to forget about other families and other kinds of families. One of the reforms that's key here is to make sure that child support debt isn't the hurdle that keeps kids from getting back together with mom and dad. And I worked in a prosecutor's office years ago. And if you don't collect child support, there's some deadbeats who won't pay it. But talk to me here about this idea of saying, let's not let this one thing stop the broader goal of bringing families back together, because I know there are going to be a lot of people who say, well, Ben, pay what you owe. Take care of your kids, and then you get your kids back. We're not going to be in the habit. But realistically, you shouldn't be pulling someone's children away because they've got an overdue book at the library or they didn't return their copy of Titanic to Blockbuster.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, if you as a parent who has lost your parental rights and you have done so you're in a bad spot in life, right? Like not excusing anything, but you have done everything right to get back on track. You've turned your life around. You've gone through rehab, whatever it might be. You've turned yourself around. You're ready to reunify with your kids. Your kids are in a foster care home, and the only thing left on the checklist with government is the fact that you still owe that child support to pay for your kids in the foster care system. That just it should not be. And that's a debt. It's a payment owed. It's not a reason that the kid would be unsafe in their parents' home. They've done everything right. So right now, Wisconsin is one of 12 states that still keeps a termination of parental rights on the books if they still owe support to pay for that foster care. So, we're saying it's simple, like just stop doing that. If they've done everything right and they owe money should not stop you from having a loving home as a child. So bring the kid back home. It doesn't excuse the money. The parent still has to pay what is owed, right? And they'll continue to do that. But bring the kid back home. Join most other states in doing that. And the interesting thing about this one, when we talked to the Department of Children and Families, they agreed. They even included it in their budget proposal from Governor Evers earlier this year. So hopefully Republicans can keep the momentum going and keep that in the budget before they pass the final document at the end of, well, who knows when they'll pass the final document. Later this summer.
Yeah, so sometime this summer. That's a conversation for another day. We're talking with Chris Reeder. He's with the Institute for Reforming Government. You can find them on Twitter, on X, at Reforming Government's GOVT, I believe. You don't have to spell the whole thing out. And yeah, money is always going to be a thing, and there are going to be a lot of conservatives who say, well, Ben, money's money, and we're not paying for these. There's another financial reform here and this is where I'm glad my wife has a real world job, because in the media, I'm paying more attention to John Fetterman and Caitlin Clark than anything else. But this idea of saving kids Social Security money, that there are a lot of kids who are in the foster care system who get Social Security payments. And right now, the state scoops that to collect so that they can pay for the care. This reform that IRG is pushing would put that in escrow, put it in a bank account, set it aside and save it so that when these young kids who are going to need some help, when they get of age, they're not handed, a bus voucher, given a handshake and said, good luck. They actually have something that they can go and start a future with.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about a small number of kids, right? The last year that we have data for was 2023. That year, there were 577 kids that this would have applied to, where they get, and they get Social Security because, look, they're in a bad spot in life, right? They're in the foster care system because they have parents who have passed. They, for one reason or another, they're eligible for Social Security benefits. So that likely means their parents have passed. So they're in the system. They're getting $700 a month in Social Security payments. And right now, state government takes that. They actually skim about 20% off the top and use the rest to kind of pay for that foster care. It doesn't pay for all the foster care by any means. It's a small percent of it. There's the argument of, well, people should, somebody has to pay for that care. We get that. But at the end of the day, this is the personal property of these 577 kids. They never signed off on the government taking it. And if you're looking at how do they get ahead in life and have a chance when they age out of the system, absolutely what you said. Like, let's set that $700 a month aside. Let's let it grow for them. When they're 18, that then is available to give them a leg up in life. It certainly won't be any sort of giant windfall, but it will be something to help them set off life on the right foot when they become an adult.
And I can anticipate the texts on the adventknows.com talking text line. Ben, the state of Wisconsin needs to be good. It's $700 a month for a couple of hundred kids. In a $55 billion state budget, I think we can find the couple of 100,000, couple of million, whatever this is. This is not a lot of money. Chris Reeder's our guest with the Institute for Reforming Government. Chris, I'll let you get out on this question. Who do we have to sell on this? Is the lobbying on Governor Evers? Because you said DCF agreed to one of these reforms. This looks like it's in the budget. Are you having to sell Republicans at the Capitol on this more than you're having to sell Governor Evers? Because the fear is always he vetoes something, or that Republicans on JFC take a look at this only as dollars and cents and not as a pro-family reform and drop the hammer.
So, interestingly, both of these items actually were included in the governor's budget. So, we had really good discussions with DCF last year, the Department of Children and Families. I mean, look, there's a lot of things that we're going to fight with this governor about, clearly. But they looked at these. They convinced the governor to include these in his budget. So they were in his budget back in February when he brought it forward. When the Finance Committee a few weeks ago kind of took the scalpel, or not scalpel, when they deleted a whole bunch of items from his budget, and most of them we would agree with that they should have been taken out, they also took these out. And they took these out as, probably just as new items and without fully understanding what they were. So the lobbying right now has to be on the Budget Committee, the Joint Finance members, to reconsider that and to put them back in when they take up the Children and Families budget later this month.
There are some times when spending a little gets you a lot more on the back end. And the relative, again, I'm as fiscally conservative as everybody, but we're going to have a budget almost as big as Illinois', and they've got twice as many people. I think that maybe we just give state workers a slightly less big raise and spend some of that money so that foster kids aren't just handed a gray sweatsuit like they got out of prison, put on a train to Chicago and said, smell you later. These are the kinds of pro-family reforms that when we say we are a pro-family party, these are included too. Chris Reeder, Institute for Reforming Government, thanks so very much for taking the time. Thanks for joining us here today.
Thank you.